Throughout history, loads of folks have stood out for being super sly in the political game, but nobody quite as slick as Cleopatra. She was like the queen of strategy, pulling off all sorts of moves to deal with tough situations. Imagine this. Her family's going downhill. There's this big, scary empire breathing down her neck, and to top it off, her siblings are giving her a run for her money, especially her sisters who are almost as sharp as she is. Crazy, right? Just a tiny tweak in their journeys could have put one of her sisters on the same level of fame Cleopatra's got, even centuries after she bit the dust. So what gives? Today, on History and Photos, we're diving into the messy, shady drama of Cleopatra's sisters. Cleopatra, the legendary figure, along with her siblings, came from a kind of unofficial connection between Ptolemy IV and his wife, who could have been his sister or cousin, Cleopatra V. Actually, this Cleopatra was just one of many with the same name in the Ptolemaic dynasty, and she's known as Cleopatra VII. There's some uncertainty about Cleopatra VI's identity, whether she was Cleopatra VII's older sister, or just the mother of Cleopatra V. The Ptolemaic lineage was pretty tangled up, with several women named Cleopatra, but historical records of Ptolemy IV point to Berenice IV as his firstborn. For the sake of clarity, let's say Cleopatra V and VI were the same person. So Ptolemy IV's legacy includes 5 kids: Berenice IV, Cleopatra VII, Ptolemy XIII, also known as Sinue IV, and Ptolemy XIV. Berenice was notably older than her siblings. However, even though she wasn't the eldest, Cleopatra VII was Ptolemy XIII's favorite. For Ptolemy XIII, the biggest hurdle was the widespread discontent brewing among both the common folks and the Egyptian aristocracy. Under his lacking leadership, Egypt was in shambles. The nation that once hailed Ptolemy I and Alexander the Great as liberators from Persian rule now longed for the fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty. With the rise of Roman dominance on the world stage, Egypt became just a shadow of its glorious past. Ptolemy XIV was compelled to grease the palms of Pompey and Julius Caesar to secure his recognition as the ruler of Egypt. Ptolemy XIV's bribery scheme was public knowledge, adding to his unpopularity from the onset of his reign. Rampant corruption and heavy-handed taxation policies failed to win him any favor with the people. Moreover, the annexation of Cyprus by Rome, which was under the command of Ptolemy IV's younger brother, stoked fears among Egyptians that their country would be the next Roman target, placing the blame squarely on the monarch. The rejection reached a boiling point when his own advisors ousted him, in a move bordering on treason. While Ptolemy XIV sought refuge in Rome, Egyptian leaders swiftly proclaimed Cleopatra V, his wife, and Berenice IV, his eldest daughter, as the new rulers of Egypt. Cleopatra VII, famously close to her father, reportedly accompanied him into exile. Ptolemy XIV was off in Rome trying to drum up the military support needed to reclaim his throne. His wife and Berenice IV were busy trying to clean up the mess he left behind. But it didn't take long for Berenice IV to grow dissatisfied with sharing power with her mother. In a bold move that likely involved some poison, she bumped off her mom to become the first female pharaoh of the Ptolemaic dynasty. You could argue that Cleopatra not only stole Berenice's position, but also a lot of her achievements. By the time she hit 20, Berenice was running Egypt solo, tackling the challenge with a strong leadership stance. Faced with the less than stellar options of her younger brothers and her dad's ineffectiveness, Berenice realized she had the reins of the royal court and decided to use that influence to make some positive changes. She proved to be a stubborn leader, but one committed to turning Egypt's fortunes around. Her reign was all about fighting corruption, beefing up national defenses, and easing up on the tax demands, always a crowd pleaser. Under Berenice IV's rule, the Ptolemaic regime aimed to get closer to the Egyptian people. They hailed from Greece and were keen on keeping their cultural identity intact, steering clear of blending in with the Egyptian locals. During this dynasty's reign, Greek became the official language of the government, while Coptic, traditionally spoken by Coptic Egyptians and representing a more modern evolution of the Egyptian language, got relegated to everyday use by the population. It's highly likely that Berenice may have reintroduced the use of Coptic in Egyptian official circles, showing her commitment to addressing the interests of the Egyptian people, whom she vowed to serve, backing up her promise through various actions during her rule. She rolled out reforms that resonated with the people's aspirations, along with bringing in some innovations of her own. However, thanks to Cleopatra and her dad's efforts to rewrite history, many of these accomplishments ended up being credited to Cleopatra. A particular concern of the Egyptian aristocracy revolved around Berenice's marital status. She remained single, with no interest in rushing into marriage. Her advisors' worry about the succession to the throne led them to push her to find a suitable husband, but Berenice had high standards. After all, as a pharaoh, she sought a partner who could match her position. However, the available marriage proposals were only from her own family members. In the end, Berenice agreed to marry Seleucus VII, a distant member of the nobility of the Seleucid Empire, who was far from any chance of ascending to the throne. This decision surprised and deeply displeased the Egyptian elite, who were already impatient with Berenice's demands and were bewildered by her choice of someone so far beneath her own prestige. Seleucus's meteoric rise to stardom quickly went to his head, and his rough and vulgar behavior soon became the talk of the town in Alexandria. Seleucus's change in behavior ended up tarnishing Berenice's reputation. Recognizing that his presence was damaging her image, Berenice resolved the matter decisively, sticking to her usual approach. When Seleucus's friends came looking for him, asking one of the pharaoh's servants about his whereabouts, they received a shocking answer. He was hanging from the roof. Berenice's successor in marriage was Archelaus, a young Greek newcomer, suggested to Berenice by her court. He, a priest, claimed to be a descendant of King Mithridates VI. Perhaps seeking to appease the Romans and improve diplomatic relations with them in the face of her father's imminent invasion with Roman support, Berenice may have seen this union as a political strategy. With Archelaus's rise, although he was named king alongside Berenice, he didn't share in governmental power. Berenice chose to appoint him as the general of her armed forces, which she intentionally downsized. During her reign, Egypt experienced a period of peace, thanks to effective diplomacy and strengthened trade relations with neighboring nations. However, the kingdom faced internal vulnerabilities, and military budget cuts were made to ensure economic sustainability. However, Berenice's major setback was failing to garner Roman support. Her father landed on the northern coast of Egypt, leading an army of Roman mercenaries under Gabinus's command, with financial backing from the First Triumvirate of Rome. The ensuing confrontation highlighted the inadequacy of the Egyptian forces against the mercenaries led by Gabinus. Ptolemy XIV regained control of Alexandria, flanked by a squad of Roman guards, reclaiming his position as pharaoh. Accompanied by Cleopatra, his favorite daughter, and in opposition to Berenice, his estranged daughter, captured by Roman forces. Immediately after reclaiming the throne, the restored monarch swiftly moved to sentence his eldest daughter, who had turned against him, to death. Berenice, bravely, faced her end with courage. The cost of Ptolemy X's return to power was once again high. Gabinius demanded substantial compensation for his services, imposing even deeper Roman influence over Egypt. The financial obligation incurred by Ptolemy to Rome allowed the Romans to position their agents in the Egyptian government, facilitating the return of Ptolemy's unpopular fiscal policies. The presence of these Roman agents deteriorated the Egyptian economy, devaluing the country's currency in the global market, particularly in relation to Rome. After 4 years of detrimental governance, dismantling the reforms implemented by Berenice, Ptolemy XIV died in 51 BC, naming Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII as successors to the throne. By appointing Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIV as the new leaders of Egypt, Ptolemy IV also assured Rome that if his lineage died out, dominion over Egypt would pass into Roman hands. It's likely that Arsinoe IV and Ptolemy XIV were Cleopatra's half-siblings, both children of Ptolemy IV, and therefore equally legitimate heirs to the Egyptian throne as Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII. With only a fraction of the offspring getting control of the state, discontent brewed among the younger siblings. Tension also simmered among the designated heirs. Cleopatra shared many traits with Berenice. During her father's second term, Cleopatra's loyalty was rewarded with the position of co-ruler, sort of a preparation for the throne. She gradually reinstated various reforms implemented by her deceased sisters, which had been undone by her father, and worked on enhancing her public image, aiming to solidify herself as the next pharaoh. So the rivalry wasn't just about her relationship with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, as she fought hard for a status that was rightfully hers. In her journey to assert herself as the sovereign ruler, Cleopatra began to distance herself from her brother, diminishing his influence and position in an attempt to establish herself definitively as the pharaoh of Egypt. And indeed, Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII were married, a union that, unfortunately, didn't play out in her favor. The dominant elite, with a patriarchal leaning, decided to throw their support behind the male pharaoh. This led Cleopatra into a forced exile from Egypt, marking one of the first times she faced adversity without her father by her side. Needing a father figure, Cleopatra found in Julius Caesar not only a stand-in for that role, but also a protector. Caesar, in turn, saw the situation as a perfect opportunity to meddle in Egypt under the pretext of resolving its internal disputes, but with personal goals of expanding his influence and strengthening his position in Rome. Meanwhile, Arsinoe IV capitalized on the discord among her siblings, emerging as a new contender for the throne. Caesar intervened decisively, forcing the Ptolemaic family to strictly adhere to their patriarch's final wish. To ensure Cleopatra got her claim, he negotiated the inclusion of Cyprus in the deal, as the island had previously been taken and annexed by Rome, stripping it from one of Cleopatra's uncles. As a result, it was agreed that Ptolemy XIII would recognize Cleopatra as co-pharaoh, while Arsinoe and Ptolemy XIV would rule Cyprus as co-regents. However, Arsinoe wasn't willing to accept a supporting role. Being Berenice and Cleopatra's sister, she refused to settle for anything less than Egypt itself. The mastermind behind Arsinoe's power was Ganymedes, a renowned advisor, who facilitated her rise to power by leading the elimination of Achilles, then commander of the armed forces. Rising to a position of command, Arsinoe chose Ganymedes, despite being a eunuch, as her right-hand man, fueling rumors of a possible special affection between them. In the context of Caesar's intervention in Egypt to restore Cleopatra to power, Arsinoe laid siege to Alexandria, ordering her forces to block the city's channels with salt water. Additionally, they erected makeshift barricades, trapping Caesar and his men in a part of the city. Faced with a shortage of water, Caesar was forced to order the digging of wells in search of drinkable water. In a desperate move, the Romans attempted to seize the lighthouse of Alexandria, only to find that Arsinoe's troops were waiting for them. Caesar, a distinguished war hero of Rome, found himself compelled to flee the city, launching himself into the sea towards a Roman vessel. This hasty retreat caused him to abandon his symbols of honor, such as his armor, helmet, and mantle, marks of his status and pride. Once again, female leadership didn't sit well with the traditionalist commanders of Hellenistic Egypt, who, aiming to avoid such a scenario, secretly negotiated with Caesar to facilitate Ptolemy XIII's return to power in exchange for abandoning Cleopatra's cause. While Cleopatra stayed in Rome with Caesar, Ptolemy XIII escalated the conflict against his sister Arsinoe until Roman reinforcements arrived. In 46 BC, Arsinoe was captured and taken to Rome, where Caesar, seeking retaliation, showcased her as a trophy in his victory celebrations, symbolizing her defeat by reenacting the scene of the burning of the Alexandria lighthouse. However, instead of applause, the Roman public expressed empathy for Arsinoe, disapproving of Caesar for ridiculing his achievements. The popular outcry led Caesar and Cleopatra to decide against executing Arsinoe, who was sentenced to serve as a priestess in the Temple of Artemis in Anatolia. However, after Caesar's death, with Mark Antony becoming Cleopatra's new partner, the couple orchestrated Arsinoe's murder within the temple itself. Some say this sacrilegious act was one of the reasons the gods favored Augustus against Mark Antony and Cleopatra. What's your opinion? Leave it in the comments, and to support our content, subscribe to our channel.